People always ask me, what made you want to work in a prison? The truth is, I didn't. I needed a job. Fast. My background in criminal justice helped, but I wasn't dreaming of bars and lockdowns. I was just trying to pay my bills. The facility was a medium-security prison in a rural area, surrounded by fields, fences, and silence. The kind of place people forget about. The kind of place where time feels different. On my first day, I reported to the front gate in a pressed uniform and freshly shaved. I was 26, nervous, and trying hard not to look it. The officer at the entrance gave me a once-over. "You'll either last 6 weeks or 6 years," he said. "We'll see which." They walked me through processing, handed me a radio, a baton, and a list of codes to memorize. I tried to keep up, but the information hit like a wave. Inmate categories, lockdown procedures, medical alerts, gang affiliations, contraband handling. Then came the walk down the main corridor, known inside as the spine. Thick metal doors, cameras in every corner, concrete floors worn smooth by time. Everything echoed. My boots, distant voices, slamming cell doors. That sound, the metallic clang of a cell shutting, it never leaves you. My first shift was a shadowing session with Officer Grant, a 15-year veteran with forearms like tree trunks and a stare that could silence a room. Keep your eyes moving. Keep your tone neutral. And never, ever turn your back on a group, he said. We walked the tiers. Rows of cells stacked like cold hotel rooms, each one holding a life, a past, a history. Some inmates ignored me. Others stared, hard, calculated, like they were trying to read everything about me in 3 seconds. A few smiled. Those were the worst. "You're fresh meat," Grant muttered. "Don't let it show." The most surreal part? It didn't feel dangerous. Not exactly. It felt watchful. Like every square inch of that place had eyes. Like the building itself was alive and breathing. By the end of the day, I had seen a man carving chess pieces out of soap, a tattoo being applied with a makeshift needle, 2 inmates arguing in a whisper that somehow felt more threatening than a scream. I went home exhausted. I stared at my ceiling for hours, hearing the buzz of the fluorescent lights still ringing in my ears. This wasn't just a job. It was a world, and I just walked into it. If you think prison is just about locked doors and orange jumpsuits, you've never really been inside. After a few weeks on the job, I learned the most important truth about prison life. The real control isn't always with the guards. It's in the inmate code. There's an entire system of unwritten rules. You break them, and there are consequences, sometimes bloody ones. It started with little things. I noticed that during mealtime, inmates always sat at the same tables. Not assigned, just understood. Sit at the wrong table, and you'd make enemies. Talk to the wrong inmate, and you'd get frozen out or worse. Grant, the officer I was shadowing, taught me the categories. White inmates stick to their group. Black inmates, same. Latinos, same. It's not our rule. It's their law. Break it, and chaos follows. I asked if it was always racial. Mostly, but it's deeper than that. Some of them go by gang, others by city. But trust me, there's always a line. Your job is to know where it is without asking. One of the first major incidents I witnessed started over a stolen packet of ramen noodles. Yeah, ramen. An inmate took it from another guy's locker. Just one packet. The next day, the thief was found in the yard. Nose broken, 2 teeth missing. No witnesses. No confession. Just silence. Grant's explanation? That wasn't about ramen. That was about respect. If they let him get away with that, everyone's vulnerable. So they handled it the way the code demands. I realized then, this wasn't a place where mistakes faded. Everything meant something. A glance. A word. A silence. Another layer of prison life that shocked me was the bartering economy. Since cash isn't allowed, inmates trade goods like currency. Instant coffee is gold. Stamps are valuable. Clean socks can be a bargaining chip. And ramen? Ramen is basically Bitcoin. Inmates build their own mini-economies, even businesses. One guy in cell block D ran a laundry operation, cleaned other inmates' uniforms in exchange for snacks or cigarettes. Another guy made greeting cards. No joke. Hand-drawn birthday cards for a packet of cookies. But with economy comes power. And power breeds control. One day, We searched a cell and found a list. Not a gang hit list, an accounting ledger. Debts owed, amounts tracked, and threats noted beside names. The inmate had built a loan shark operation inside his cell, complete with collection agents. Grant handed me the ledger. Welcome to prison banking. But maybe the most haunting moment of that month came from an inmate named Felix. He was in for life. Murder, gang-related. Mid-40s, quiet, polite. Kept to himself. Never gave us trouble. One day, I was doing cell checks and saw him sitting cross-legged on the floor, organizing small pieces of colored paper. Hundreds of them. He looked up. Origami, he said. I asked what he was making. He showed me a tiny paper crane. I make one every day. It's my version of a calendar. I was silent. Didn't know what to say. He added, there's no such thing as days in here. Only moments. You got to make them count. By the end of that week, I stopped looking at inmates as just numbers or uniforms. They were systems. Some broken, some dangerous, some more honest than the people I knew on the outside. But inside those walls, one thing was clear. Everyone had a role. Everyone had rules. And survival depended on knowing both. If you work in a prison long enough, people will ask, were you ever there during a riot? I was. And let me tell you, it's nothing like the movies. There's no dramatic music, no slow motion, just noise, chaos, panic, and the sound of your own heartbeat, louder than anything else. It happened on a Thursday. I remember because it was meatloaf day in the cafeteria, always a point of complaint. The day started like any other. Cell checks, tier rotations, minor arguments over TV time. Nothing out of the ordinary. But tension was building all week. Two rival groups had been quietly at odds for days. Something about a stolen radio, threats made in the yard. Officers noted it, but there was no clear evidence to act on. By noon, the temperature had spiked. Literally and figuratively. The air was thick. Conversations were short. Inmates were walking with their heads low and their hands clenched. I was posted near the dining hall. That's when it started. Two inmates, from opposing groups, locked eyes across the room. Then one of them stood up and threw a tray. It hit the other square in the chest. In less than 5 seconds, the entire room exploded. Fists, trays, screams, chairs flying, blood, dozens of inmates rushing in from every direction. The radios lit up. Black, Black. Dining hall now. I was in the middle of it, trying to dodge flying objects, pull inmates apart, radio for backup. Adrenaline surged. I couldn't think, only react. I saw one inmate slam another's head into a table. Another stabbed someone with a sharpened toothbrush. Makeshift weapons appeared out of nowhere, shanks, belt buckles, even a spoon with the edge filed down. Sirens wailed. Emergency response officers stormed in with riot shields and pepper spray. The air filled with shouting, coughing, crying. But the worst moment? An inmate locked eyes with me from across the chaos. He wasn't fighting, just watching. Calm, too calm. He smiled, like he was waiting for something. Then he disappeared into the crowd. It took nearly 20 minutes to contain the riot. Felt like hours. In the aftermath, everything was red and gray. Blood on the floor, shoes scattered, bodies being dragged out, some unconscious, some resisting. I was shaking, my uniform soaked in sweat. 4 inmates were hospitalized. One officer suffered a broken wrist. Dozens of minor injuries, but no deaths. That night, I sat in the locker room with my head in my hands. Grant walked in, tossed me a water bottle. You okay? I nodded. Lied. Yeah. He sat beside me. First riot. Yeah. He didn't say much. Just, you never forget the first one. Or the smell. He was right. I still remember it. Sweat, metal, fear, blood. And something else. A kind of electric tension that doesn't leave you for hours after. In the days that followed, the prison went into lockdown. No movement. No yard time. Cell meals only. Tension hung heavy, even with the quiet. Everyone was on edge, staff and inmates alike. The inmate who smiled at me during the riot, he was found a day later with a note in his cell. Don't worry, that wasn't the real show. Chilling. No one ever found out what he meant. They transferred him to a higher security facility. I never saw him again, but I think about that smile often. After the riot, something in me shifted. I wasn't just a new officer anymore. I had seen the system under pressure. I had felt what it was like to stand in the storm and try not to drown. And I realized this job wasn't just about control. It was about anticipation, reading the room, watching body language, feeling the mood of the prison before it spoke. Because by the time the riot starts, it's already too late. Not everything in prison is violence and fear. Sometimes something happens that shakes your assumptions. Something that reminds you not every man behind bars is evil. That some of them, even the hardened ones, still have a line they won't cross. This is the story of the inmate who saved my life. His name was Ellis. Mid-50s. Tall. Quiet. Life sentence. Murder conviction. No gang ties. Mostly kept to himself. He worked in the prison library, a dusty room barely used by half the population, but his pride and joy. He was respectful with staff, never caused trouble. Some called him the professor because of how he talked, measured, thoughtful, like every word cost him something. I'd pass him on rounds. Sometimes we'd exchange nods. Once, he handed me a folded paper with a quote on it. To be free is not merely to cast off one's chains, but to live in a way that respects the freedom of others. Mandela. I kept that quote in my locker. One afternoon, I was assigned to assist with tier cleanup and monitor the workers. It was usually routine, just making sure inmates sweeping, mopping, and handling supplies didn't start trouble. But that day, something fell off. 2 inmates, both affiliated with a local street gang, kept giving me side eyes, whispering, laughing under their breath. I wasn't paranoid, but I trusted my gut. I radioed it in, made a note. Later, as I was doing a final sweep of the storage room, I turned my back for maybe 5 seconds. That's all it took. I felt a sharp hit to the back of my shoulder. I spun around. One of the inmates had swung a mop handle, aiming for my head. It grazed me, not enough to drop me, but I stumbled. Before I could react again, another figure lunged at me from behind a shelf. I remember raising my arms, trying to block whatever was coming. Then nothing. Black. I woke up on the floor. My head was pounding. My shirt was torn. Blood on my sleeve. But I was alive. And the 2 inmates? They were already restrained, face down, hands zip-tied, bleeding from their noses. Standing above them was Ellis, breathing hard, hands trembling, one knuckle broken. He looked down at me and said, "You got to stop turning your back on people." Later, in the infirmary, I got the full story. Ellis had been restocking old books nearby. He saw the 2 inmates eyeing me, hiding behind a shelf. He'd known something was coming. When they attacked, he didn't hesitate. He fought them off with a metal book cart. He risked everything. Later, when I asked him why, he shrugged. "You wear the badge, sure," he said, "but you show respect. That's rare in here." He didn't want a reward, didn't want special treatment. He didn't even want it reported, just asked that I say he intervened to prevent escalation. I honored that. Over the next few months, I visited the library more often. We talked about books, about time, about regret. Ellis once told me, "People think time is what punishes you in here. But it's not. It's memory. It's waking up every day knowing what you did, and that the world will never see you as more than that moment." I didn't argue. He'd never be free. But in some ways, he was freer than the inmates who still lied to themselves. The prison transferred him a year later to a facility with better hospice care. I heard he was sick, cancer, maybe. I never saw him again, but I still carry that paper quote. And I never forget who saved me. Not a fellow officer, not friend, an inmate. People assume you leave a job like prison work because of burnout, or fear, or trauma. And yes, all those things were part of it. But the real reason I left? Because one day, I realized I was starting to go numb. It crept in slowly. At first, I could still feel everything. The tension, the adrenaline, even the smallest victories. I took pride in keeping things calm. I felt a sense of purpose in diffusing a heated moment, breaking a fight before it erupted, guiding a distraught inmate back to order. I thought I was doing good work. But then the routine became armor. Another fight? Process the reports. Another overdose? Bag the evidence, call in due risk assessment. Another cell search? Confiscate contraband. Log everything meticulously. Move on. The formality of it swallowed the feeling. The repetition flattened urgency. The endless cycle of calls, paperwork, lock UPS, release, shift handover, it built a barrier inside me. And when I saw a young inmate hang himself with a bedsheet tied to a vent, and all I felt was frustration about the paperwork, I knew something had broken. Not in the system. In me. Before that moment, the tension spiraled, yes. But I still felt jolts of empathy. I still saw the human behind the badge. Now, I felt irritation. More hassle. More delays. More work. And not a sole moment of grief or shock. Not even sadness. The moment I truly decided to leave came quietly. It was during a lockdown. Full facility freeze. The radios were buzzing. Officers on high alert. The wing reverberated with static, voices crackling warnings, intercom announcements echoing through thick concrete hallways. But my assignment that day was just to escort a medical call. The inmate was in his 70s, dying of liver failure. He looked gaunt and fragile, with hollow cheeks and sunken eyes. He was shackled to the infirmary bed, even though he couldn't sit up without help. He trembled as a nurse adjusted his faded hospital gown. I stood by the door, arms crossed, watching, clocking every second, shifting weight from one foot to another, registering protocols better than his condition. The nurse wiped his forehead with a damp cloth, asked him if he was in pain. He nodded faintly, eyes almost closed with exhaustion. Then he whispered, "Do they let us say goodbye?" The nurse looked at me. I looked away. I didn't know what to say. Didn't know what I was allowed to say. The rules were ironclad. Personal moments weren't part of the program. And the old man's words felt like a breach, not of policy, but of humanity. And the worst part? I didn't care enough to ask. I didn't care enough to offer a word. Didn't care enough to risk protocol. Didn't care that a human soul was asking to say farewell. That night, I went home, stood in the shower, and stared at the wall for 20 minutes. Not crying, not panicking. Just blank. The steam curled around me, but nothing warmed me. I turned the water hotter, but it only drummed on my shoulders in monotony. The mirror above the sink stared back at a hollowed-out shape where I used to stand, and I realized that part had left me. Gone. That's when I realized prison had done something to me. Something subtle. Something dangerous. It hadn't made me tougher. It had made me colder. And I didn't want to live like that. I gave my notice 2 weeks later. Some co-workers were shocked. Others weren't surprised at all. Grant, one of the senior officers I respected, didn't say much, just nodded and handed me a folded napkin with "Good luck, rookie" scribbled on it. No speeches. No fuss. The weight of that tiny napkin felt heavier than any report I'd ever filled. On my last shift, I walked the spine one more time. The long central corridor with cell blocks branching off, pale concrete walls, drainage grates underfoot, flickering strip lights overhead. I nodded at familiar faces, some who hated me, some who respected me, some who would forget me the second I was gone. I stopped by the library. Ellis's replacement had taken over. A young guy, wide-eyed, trying to reorganize the shelves into some semblance of catalog system. Rows of donated paperbacks, neglected magazines, torn maps, and hardcover biographies. I didn't say much. I just left that Mandela quote on the desk before I walked out. To be free is not merely to cast off one's chains. I scrawled the rest. But to live in a way that respects and enhances the freedom of others. It felt like a final act, not of rebellion, but of preservation. A signal that beyond those gray walls, something lighter, something human still mattered. It's been years now. I don't wear a badge anymore. I don't carry a radio. But I still carry the stories, the sounds, the faces, the haunted eyes of someone drifting from remorse to hopelessness. The sudden relief in a voice when a cell quiets. The whispered pleas of someone clinging to dignity despite the loss. Working in a prison taught me more about power, survival, cruelty, and unexpected humanity than anything else in my life. It taught me how small choices echo in silent halls. How even someone behind bars can hold seeds of kindness or despair. And while I'm glad I left, I'm also grateful I was there. Because now, when people ask me what it's really like behind those walls, I can say this. It's not black and white. It's not good versus evil. It's not one side versus another. It's gray. Gray walls, gray rules, gray morality. But within all that gray, there are flickers of light. You just have to know where to look.